Welcome to another episode, everyone. Why will Snoop Dogg never visit this one neighborhood? Well, Snoop Dogg has been through a lot. He's been exposed for lying. He caught a murder case. He went to jail before. He's been viral. He's been rich. And he's been called out for being a studio gangster, not a real gang member. That's okay if he's not a real member, as long as he's not portraying himself to be one. But there's one particular neighborhood that Snoop Dogg refuses to show up at. Why? Well, apparently these individuals have it out for Snoop Doggy Dogg. Some say that Snoop Doggy Dogg has just grown up and doesn't have to go to this neighborhood or any other neighborhood that he's 50 years old or older. What does he look like hanging out? And others say he's not going over there to these other neighborhoods because he is a studio gangster and has been a studio gangster from day one. What say you?
First of all, Snoop wasn't even next to us when that happened. You know what I'm saying? Like, he bugging. He knew damn well it wasn't like that.
So Snoop was nowhere around?
No.
What do you think about Snoop? Is he a Crip or Blood?
He's supposed to be a Crip.
Why do you say suppose? He's fake? He's not real?
You fake, Snoop, you fake, motherfucker.
On one side of the game, you have Snoop Dogg the icon, a hip-hop legend and global superstar. But on the other side, there's a very different reputation, a version of Snoop that, according to some people in the streets, carries little to no real respect.
And what you think about Snoop's story getting vandalized by Bloods?
Why would he put it in a Blood neighborhood? Inglewood full of Bloods. Why would he put his store in Inglewood? You know what I'm saying?
From catching heat from rivals and even members of his own gang, to insiders calling him out mover stories and questionable antics, Snoop's image has always come with controversy. Let's get into it. From the very beginning, Snoop Dogg's image has always been connected to the Rollin' 20s Crips out of Long Beach, California. According to Snoop himself, he started hanging around the Rollin' 20s when he was about 12 or 13 years old. And it wasn't some dramatic movie-style initiation either. It was just the environment. He was a kid growing up around it, being around older homies, watching how people moved, seeing the cars, the money, the respect certain people got just off reputation alone. When you grow up in that kind of setting, gang culture doesn't always feel like a choice. It just feels normal.
I was just hanging out, infatuated, looking at the older guys and seeing what they was doing and wanting to be a part of it, and they welcoming you in because you young.
But one thing Snoop has always admitted, which surprises a lot of people, is that the streets never actually felt glamorous to him. He said himself that he was scared most of the time. "I was always scared," he once admitted. "That's why I believe I survived."
Did you ever experience fear, or were you fearless?
No, I was always scared.
Scared?
I'm scared. That's why I believe I survived, because you have to either have fear or respect.
And that tells you a lot about how he moved back then. Fear was a survival instinct. Fear kept him paying attention. While others were chasing reputation, Snoop was mostly trying to stay alive long enough to make it out. Eventually, music became...
Yeah, but at the end of the day, the individuals who are fearful in this culture and these neighborhoods are oftentimes the individuals who survive because they're fearful or / paranoid. They don't put themselves in certain situations. When they see a funny situation developing, they remove themselves from that situation out of fear or paranoia, whatever you want to call it, that's fine. But it's something to not being super tough all the time and callous or not caring, unemotional, fearless. And you find yourself in many situations because you're dealing with other individuals who have the same mindset. So sometimes the fear, as he said, can save your life.
That exit. As his rap career started forming, Snoop began spending more time in Los Angeles. Then, everything changed once Dr. Dre discovered him. Almost overnight, this skinny kid from Long Beach with the smooth voice and laid-back delivery became one of the most recognizable new artists in hip-hop. From there, the rise was crazy. Snoop Dogg turned into a global figure, somebody whose influence went way beyond gangsta rap. But while the world was celebrating him as a legend, another conversation quietly followed him in the background. Because depending on who you ask, Snoop Dogg has always had two completely different reputations. To fans, he's a West Coast pioneer, but in certain street circles, people have always looked at him a little differently. One of the biggest criticisms over the years is the idea that Snoop was never really a frontline gang member. Critics say he was around gang culture, not deeply active in street politics itself. Now, that doesn't mean Snoop lived a clean or sheltered life. He's openly talked about selling coke, when he was younger, making serious money for that time, sometimes up to $1,000 a week. He saw violence. He lived in dangerous environments. That part isn't debated.
Start selling drugs out of my mama's house and she didn't know this. So before you know it, we outside one day and they come by and do a drive-by. My little brother outside.
But in gang culture, there's levels. There's a difference between being around it and being deeply involved in the structure and politics of it. And to some people, Snoop fell into that first category. When Death Row Records exploded in the early 90s, Snoop's reputation grew right along with it. Standing next to Suge Knight, a man people genuinely feared, gave Snoop an automatic aura.
That would be Suge Knight. And that's okay that Snoop Dogg is not really from the neighborhood as far as being put on and was riding around at the age of 14 and 15, shooting people, really banging the set, tattooed up and all of this. Instead, he just grew up over there apparently and is affiliated with those individuals, especially as he began to come up. They said, oh yeah, okay. They accepted him, but he was never really one of their members before the fame and all of that. But that's okay. Again, as long as he's not out acting like he's one of the top individuals, which he doesn't necessarily do.
Of danger. Death Row itself had a reputation that felt bigger than music. It felt like power. From the outside looking in, Snoop seemed untouchable, but insiders later suggested that a lot of that protection came from who was around him more than his own street standing. Dr. Dre introduced him to the world. Suge Knight protected the brand, and Death Row enforced the image. So critics began saying Snoop's credibility looked more like association than independent street validation. Then, when Death Row collapsed, which destroyed a lot of careers, Snoop somehow landed safely again, this time signing with Master P's No Limit Records, another label heavily connected to real street figures. To some observers, that just reinforced the idea that Snoop always found himself protected by powerful environments that maintained his image. But the bigger issue for critics wasn't just that. It was the feeling that Snoop still tried to present himself as overly gangster even when people felt the reality didn't fully match. And that's where certain stories started raising eyebrows. One of the most famous examples is the Training Day movie set story. Snoop once told a story about filming the movie while wearing a blue tracksuit, a clear Crip color, only to realize they were shooting in a blood-controlled neighborhood, enemy territory. According to Snoop's version, he calmly handled it like a street diplomat. He said he asked to speak to the neighborhood OG, who supposedly rolled up in a wheelchair, just like the character Snoop played in the film. Snoop claimed he bought about $300 worth of weed from him, smoothed everything over, and filming continued peacefully.
The movie was Denzel before I got the scene, right? They said, what you want to wear in the movie? I'm like, give me a blue sweatsuit, let me get my blue chucks. They didn't tell me where it was. We get to that, there's 100,000 bloods on the corner. In that little wig shop, I said, hey man, go find the OG from here, bring that nigga down here. They went and found the OGest nigga they could find. He rolled in a wheelchair down there. Got to shoot 3-4 days in a row, no harm, no foul. Gotta know how to politic.
It sounded like a perfect story, almost too perfect, because later, a completely different version came out. Rapper Spice One, who had connections to people involved, said things actually got tense outside Snoop's trailer. Local Bloods reportedly weren't feeling a known Crip filming in their area. Bottles were allegedly thrown, and the situation was getting heated fast. And while Snoop stayed inside, unsure how bad things might get, someone else stepped in to calm everything down. That person was Spice One himself. According to him, one of his OG Crip homies called and warned him things were about to go left. So Spice pulled up to the set.
Throwing, bottles at Snoop trailer. He didn't say blood, he ain't gonna say that, but, that's what he tell me. And I barely understand him, but I got it. I understood him. Since the OG said go over there and holler at him and try to calm him down, because I think they was throwing bottles at the trailer, at Snoop's trailer.
And once he arrived, the energy shifted immediately. People recognized him, and that recognition alone lowered tensions. He didn't come in acting tough. He just talked calmly, reminding everyone that police would shut everything down if things escalated. Nobody wanted that kind of attention. Eventually, the Bloods backed off. They moved down the street, lit up some weed, and waited things out while police briefly passed through the area. After After everything cooled down, Spice went back to Snoop's trailer. They kicked it, smoked, and talked, with Snoop reportedly not even realizing how close things had come to turning serious outside. Now, if there's one thing nobody can deny about Snoop Dogg, it's his...
So then Snoop lied. What Snoop said was a was a total misrepresentation. Snoop's his story was, as we just heard, that he got the most OGest individual over there in the neighborhood and smooth things out with him when the Bloods were out there hanging out and he pulled up to film this movie. But we hear Spice One say, they were hurling bottles at Snoop Dogg's trailer. He hadn't spoke to no one. He had to come and settle the situation down. Oh, Snoop.
Survival instinct. The man has survived situations that ended careers and, in some cases, ended lives. He made it through a murder trial in the 90s during one of the most dangerous eras in hip-hop. He survived the fall of Death Row Records, which basically swallowed up artists and reputations overnight. And somehow, he also survived multiple changes in rap culture, eras that completely pushed a lot of his peers out of relevance. Yet through all of that, Snoop didn't just survive, he reinvented himself. One minute he was the face of gangsta rap controversy, and the next, he was America's favorite uncle, doing cooking shows with Martha Stewart, popping up in family commercials, commentating sports, and becoming one of the most recognizable personalities in entertainment. To fans, that looked like growth, like a guy who simply understood how to evolve and stay ahead of the game. But not everybody saw it that way. Especially in certain street circles, Snoop's ability to always land on his feet raised questions. Some people didn't see adaptability, they saw someone being two-faced. Over time, a narrative started forming that Snoop had a habit of switching depending on the situation. When the gangster image helped his credibility, he leaned into it. When things got risky or the industry changed, he shifted into a safer, more commercial version of himself. And with that perception came rumors, whispers, that Snoop had a tendency to distance himself from people when situations got complicated. One name that
I don't know. What do you all think about that? Snoop Dogg did have a certain persona, a certain image that was out there that I'm sure he was mostly responsible for. As a gang member, a Crip from Long Beach. And then he did indeed go mainstream and started performing for Donald Trump and having cooking shows with Martha Stewart. But he was still sort of representing in his own way, if you will. He didn't just go all the way Hollywood. But again, some individuals are just saying that he grew out of that. He doesn't have to hang out and be in these neighborhoods. He doesn't have to be in Long Beach, be in the 20s anymore at his ripe old age. He can try to help these individuals out and then move on.
Constantly gets brought up in those conversations is Tupac Shakur. Tupac himself actually called him out on it while he was still alive. What many people don't know is that by the time Pac died, he and Snoop weren't even on good terms anymore. Their relationship had completely fallen apart.
What about Snoop?
What about him? It's an open, free business. But I just know he'll have more problems without us than he would with us.
Insiders who were around back then say part of the tension came down to jealousy. Before Pac signed to Death Row, Snoop was the star of the label. He was Suge Knight's golden boy, the face of West Coast rap, the one everybody looked to. But when Pac came home from prison and joined the camp, all of that changed overnight. Pac had this larger-than-life energy, dropped in music at a crazy pace, and instantly became the center of attention. The spotlight shifted, and according to a lot of people who were close to the situation, Snoop didn't handle that too well.
When Tupac joined Death Row, was Snoop jealous of Tupac joining Death Row?
Snoop definitely was a little razzled because he used to be in Snoop Dogg. And when Pac came, he demanded all the attention and got it. Everybody had to move out the way when Pac got there. Okay?
That jealousy started seeping into little things, and eventually, it blew up in a big way. The breaking point for their friendship came after Pac released his infamous diss track, Hit 'Em Up. At that time, the war between Death Row and Bad Boy was at an all-time high. Everybody had chosen sides, and tensions were boiling over. In 1996, when the Death Row camp was in New York for the MTV Video Music Awards, Snoop's behavior started raising eyebrows. First, He skipped out on a scheduled rehearsal for Saturday Night Live with Pac, which was already a red flag. Then, he made a move that completely blindsided Tupac. Snoop went on a local New York radio station and told the world, "I got nothing but love for Biggie and Puffy." Now, you gotta understand how deep the beef was at this point. For Snoop to say something like that, while standing in New York of all places, was like a slap in Pac's face. But according to people who were there, it wasn't just the words that stung. What really burned Pac was the fact that just days before, Snoop had been right there in the studio with him, laying down diss tracks aimed directly at Biggie and Puff. One minute he's riding with Pac on wax, throwing shots, and the next he's smiling on the radio saying he's got love for them. To Pac, that was betrayal.
Pac was angry not only because they said, not just because of that interview. A couple weeks before that, people don't know that Pac and Snoop did songs dissing Biggie. I remember hearing it. Pac looking at it like, come on, man, you were just in LA dissing him with me. Now you on the radio saying something different. You know what I mean? So I think that triggered some type of tension.
Sadly, before they could ever sit down and really hash it out, Pac was killed in Vegas. After his death, Snoop tried to explain his side of things. He said in interviews that the reason they never reconciled was because Pac just didn't understand him, according to Snoop.
Oh, yeah, they certainly got in there. They had a beef going, not a beef. They had words, Snoop Dogg and Tupac, not Pac. Tupac, Amaru Shakur, rest in peace. They had words. Snoop has said that that's actually why he was not in Vegas on that night. He was scheduled to go. He was supposed to go. But him and Tupac had words. Pac was upset about what they're talking about. Him, Pac feeling like Snoop Dogg did not have his back in the beef, the West Coast, East Coast beef. Snoop saying that he was cool with Biggie and Puffy and all of that. And then before they can settle this, Pac went to Vegas and lost his life. But many individuals have said that Snoop Dogg is jealous of Tupac Shakur, was jealous of Tupac Shakur. I can see how that is possible. Snoop Dogg is Snoop Dogg. He's the guy, he's the man on death row. He's pushed death row, him and Dr. Dre. And then in comes Pac. Everyone's fawning over Pac. And Snoop feeling like he has to take a back seat, that he certainly doesn't have the same respect as Tupac. And so perhaps some jealousy could have seeped in.
Snoop, he never had hate for Biggie, never wanted to see Big get hurt, and Pac couldn't see that.
You know, I don't think we was really on good terms before he died, because he didn't really understand the way I didn't really have no hate towards Biggie, and I didn't really feel like he should continue to, to get at Biggie.
But here's where a lot of fans and insiders still call foul. If Snoop truly never had a problem with Biggie, then why was he in the booth helping Pac record diss tracks? Why play both sides? Why say one thing to Pac in the studio, then turn around and tell the media the exact opposite? To many people, it looked like Snoop was trying to protect his own image, acting like he was cool with everybody while letting Pac be the one out front taking all the heat. And when Pac got upset, Snoop brushed it off like Pac was just overreacting, when in reality, it was Snoop who was sending mixed messages. But as messy as things were while Pac was alive, what Snoop did after Pac's death had people shaking their heads even more. A lot of folks see it as one of his biggest betrayals. See, there's this name that always pops up when people talk about Pac's murder, Big Dre, from the Southside Compton Crips. Most people point the finger at Orlando Anderson as the trigger man, but there's a strong belief from some insiders that Big Dre was actually the real shooter that night in Vegas. Now here's the crazy part. What did Snoop do after Pac was gone? He worked with him. Not long after Pac died, Big Dre started up his own label called Runoff Records. He dropped a mixtape called Hard White that somehow pulled in some serious features. Warren G, MC8, and Snoop Dogg himself. When that news hit the streets, it set off a firestorm. People were asking the obvious questions. Where did Big Dre suddenly get that kind of bread to pay for those names? And more importantly, why would Snoop of all people agree to work with someone who might have been connected to Pac's murder? To a lot of Pac's fans, that spoke volumes. It felt like Snoop was showing his true colors. Like maybe Pac's death didn't mean as much to him as he wanted people to believe.
Suge Knight revealing that, Snoop, he worked with Big Dre after Tupac got killed. And when I heard that, man, that was wild. For you to be working with somebody that was in the car with Keefy D when Tupac got shot, That's crazy, man.
That's crazy, bro. Like, if you know this dude 100% is in a car with a person that killed your boy and you do a song with him, it just really shows how you always felt about Pac.
And once people started calling him out, Snoop began to switch his whole tune. Suddenly, every time he did an interview, he was showering Pac with love, acting like they were inseparable, best of friends until the end. To many, it looked less like honesty and more like damage control gang backlash. And maybe that's why respect for him started feeling different in some street spaces. The belief that he moved based on convenience instead of code. Then came another moment that really made people side-eye him, and this time it involved both sides of gang culture. At one point, Snoop appeared in a commercial promoting unity between Crips and Bloods. The message sounded positive, ending violence and encouraging peace.
But damn, man, we gotta be killing each other for something important, right? What are we killing each other for?
Colors.
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 But the way it was done didn't sit right with a lot of people connected to that world. For gangs whose rivalry is tied to decades of real loss, real trauma, and real history, the commercial felt off. Instead of coming across as meaningful, many felt it watered down something serious. And what made it worse was that the message was tied to selling a beer brand.
Lift your drinks up if you're watching this movie in a theater or at home and pour out a little liquor. It's the ghetto thing. Just play along. This one goes out to all the fallen soldiers out there.
So instead of looking like a genuine peace effort, critics felt like gang culture and the pain connected to it was being turned into marketing. That didn't go over well at all. And the backlash wasn't just online talk either. Some people made their feelings known in real life.
I want to see Andre the Giant go up against Hulk Hogan. Ooh, wait. Oh, or how about a classic matchup of Rocky the Rock Maivia versus Cactus Jack?
In 2023, Snoop opened a Funko Pop-themed store in Inglewood called Dogg.
Well, I mean, I don't have a problem with the commercial, other than the fact that, yeah, they're pushing alcohol, they're pushing liquor. You know, you're speaking to a certain demographic, and you're pushing, and we don't want black men to be abusing alcohol. And we don't want the alcohol industry to profit from our pain. So that part of the commercial, I would probably have a problem with. But the fact that the individual said that they're dying for colors, and somehow people are upset, feeling like this minimizes the gang culture. It absolutely does not. This is why people are dying for stupid shit. It's dumb. It's dumb as hell. For colors, it's dumb as hell.
Dogg House. The shop came from a partnership with Funko and featured collectible figures inspired by his career and legacy. Snoop was genuinely excited about it, calling it a reflection of his journey as both a rapper and businessman.
And come visit me at the Dogg House, right across the street from SoFi Stadium. The WWE, Funko, and me? Now that's a dream matchup.
He invited fans to come through and experience something unique, promising it would be unlike anything they'd seen before. At first, everything seemed cool, but just a few months after opening, the store was vandalized.
And what you think about Snoop's store getting vandalized by Bloods?
Why would he put it in a blood neighborhood? Inglewood full of Bloods.
Good
Why
question.
would he put his store in Inglewood? You know what I'm saying?
Outside the shop was a large mural of Snoop wearing one of his signature all-blue outfits, a clear nod to his longtime association with the Crips. Photos later surfaced online showing that someone had spray painted over the blue clothing with red paint, symbolically replacing it with the Bloods color. Next to the mural were graffiti tags with anti-Crip messages, including CK, which stands for Crip Killer. The message was loud and clear. Not everybody appreciated how Snoop represented gang culture publicly. Moments like this really show the strange position Snoop Dogg occupies. In hip-hop and mainstream culture, he still gets nothing but flowers. He's a legend, a pioneer, somebody whose influence stretches across generations. But outside of that mainstream love, certain controversies and decisions have...
I don't know. Let me know what you all think in the comments. He's saying that Snoop Doggy Dogg is a studio gangster, that he does not have respect in the street. Never did actually say exactly which hood he cannot visit or he never will visit. I'm assuming he's talking about one of these hoods in Long Beach or just any gang-banging hood, really. Snoop Dogg being over there is just not a good look. He's not respected like that in the street as a member, but that's okay. He's respected in the industry, at least until he sold out to Donald Trump. But nevertheless, he doesn't have to be a real, had never been a real member out there harming other black men in order to get his respect. And he should be able to go anywhere that he wants to go, but you just have to be careful wherever you go. And that's for anyone, whether you are a famous individual or not. You have to be extremely careful going anywhere in Long Beach, Compton, Los Angeles, California, or anywhere out of state for that matter. But let me know what you think in the comments. And Snoop Doggy Dogg, was he ever, or any of you ever really considered Snoop Doggy Dogg a real member? Or just someone who was making music, grew up over there in Long Beach, grew up around the Rolling 20 Crips, and was affiliated with them. He was just affiliated with them. And yeah, he went sort of mainstream with Martha Stewart and different businesses, and interviews and being on mainstream TV and movies and everything else. But what's wrong with that? He's trying to be successful. He is successful. He's worth $150 million. What are you supposed to do? Hang out in the hood? That just doesn't get you anywhere. That lifestyle doesn't get you anywhere. We've seen many individuals, rappers included, just seen what happened to Nipsey Hussle, just in the hood. For whatever, however it happened, still in the hood. No. Whatever hood he can't visit, so what? Shouldn't want to go over there anyway. That's what I say. Let me know what you think in the comments. Stay safe and stay free, people.